Well, hey, everybody. I hope everybody's doing great today. Look, I have a very special guest we're going to talk to, Pam Hemphill. Now, probably many of you know her, or you've seen her stuff, or you've seen her around, or you've seen me talk about her, and we are really excited to have her today. She and I have been communicating a lot, but I think this is the first time we've met face to face. Sort of met, virtually met face to face. It's kind of like it's great for both of us to be able to see each other because I think we can share a lot of what we've been through. But let me first off introduce Pam, and then we'll kind of get right into it because I think it's going to be a very important conversation. So, Pam, you're a former Trump supporter who took part in the United States Capitol attack on January 6, 2021. You nicknamed yourself the MAGA Granny in reference to the MAGA slogan and by social media users following the attack. You were convicted and sentenced in 2022 to 60 days in prison, 36 months of probation, and $500 restitution because of the Capitol. And you are famous now for having changed your mind on Donald Trump, seen the light, and refused a presidential pardon. And I think you and one other person were the only two to do that out of so many that were pardoned. And I think it's really important. So, Pam, welcome, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you. How are you doing today?
Oh, wonderful. And thank you so much for having me on. I'm so thrilled to talk to you. First,
Oh,
it's
that's
a little
awesome.
correction about Mega Granny. I want to get rid of that name. I'm in prison, and my brother calls me and says, "You know, you've been on Fox News 3 times, and they're giving you the name Mega Granny." I said, "I don't want that name, Mega Granny. I'm not that old." No, I'm just kidding. But that came from Carl Tucker.
Oh, wonderful! What a great one. Well, listen, what I want to do is kind of get into the story because again, you and I met a while ago. I mean, kind of started interacting a while ago, and there was a number of things that happened kind of as I've known you that include not just the right rejecting you, but a couple times when the left has actually rejected you because of your past. And I really want to get into that. But first, let's talk about just kind of as I learned about you. One thing that I thought was kind of interesting is you weren't always a MAGA type. You know what? I read a quote from you where you said, "I kind of typically voted Republican because that's what my family did," and it seems like the your kind of interest in or intensity of Donald Trump happened kind of close to the election in 2020. Why don't you talk a little about that and kind of what it is because I think a lot of people want to understand what it is about Donald Trump that draws people in, and I think you can share a lot of.
Well, there's many of us that really are not informed in political. We're not in the political world. We're dependent on our family to
Mhm.
guide us and trust that they know who's the best person to vote for. And I was relying on my family. I'm a retired alcohol and drug counselor, and my research was on psychopaths and addiction and mental health. And I wasn't even paying attention to the news half the time. But they would send me books, and my family are very schooled in politics. Of course, you know, the wealthy people are. And
Mhm.
they kept telling me that Trump would be the best thing for our nation. But I said, but wait. What about when he said the P word? I did
Mhm.
not like that. And I never really liked Trump per se. Anyway, but they gave me some information. Then I thought, okay, I'll listen to them because I respect them. I didn't do my own research.
Mhm.
That's was the problem.
Do you think so? Kind of leading up to January 6th, so you end up. What is it that kind of drew you to go to the Capitol on that day? And then what I'm curious about is, having been I was on the other side, obviously, of that in the Capitol. I was in my office and watching. I actually looked out on the west front of the Capitol, and I could see like all this stuff going on. Thankfully, I had left the floor of the House. But one thing I certainly noticed was there was kind of this feeling of a mob mentality where you get kind of drawn into it and the energy is so intense that it's hard to actually walk away from. So, what made you decide to go on January 6th to the Capitol and then kind of talk about that moment, that day that where you found yourself? And I want to make it very clear you didn't commit violence and stuff like that. But you ended up in the Capitol. Kind of talk about that point and how that worked? Because I think a lot of people need to understand. And you're a counselor by trade, so you understand kind of the psychology of things. People need to understand the psychology of a lot of people that were there that day in terms of how they got drawn into this.
Well, you know, when Trump, the lockdowns went started, I had seen a video, and it was Ammon Bundy. I don't know if you know who Ammon Bundy
Mm-mm,
is.
mm-mm,
Oh, far right. He stood up to the government. on his ranch, and he's very
Oh, the
famous.
Bundy guy. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'm going to go hear what he has to say. Well, that mentality of the far right, they interpret the Constitution their way. And it's
Mm-hmm.
all lies. And if you're a person like me that's not schooled in politics or the Constitution, you're just listening to these people. So I had the mentality of Emmett Bundy and all the megas. Now, back then it wasn't mega. It's
Mm-hmm.
now mega. And they weren't as open about being racist and everything they're against like they are today. But I'm listening to these people. So when I got there, what happened though, I had I'd been diagnosed with cancer and I
Mm.
had surgery. And my brother called and said, "How would you like to go see Trump? You've been out there videotaping all everywhere in Boise. How would you like that for a Christmas gift?" And I said, "Oh, that would be wonderful. I could go there and videotape him. And I'm live on Facebook. I got thousands of followers. I could be their eyes for him." So I got there. I got there too late. And I'm walking around asking people, "Oh my God, I missed Trump's speech. What else is going to be going on?" And they said, "Well, Trump's going to the Capitol." "Why
Oh.
is he going to the Capitol?" "That's weird. He just had a talk." And I thought, well,
Mm-hmm.
there must be a reason. And so I'm in front of the Capitol. I get there. I turn around and I see this group of men. And I thought, I wonder if those are the Proud Boys. I didn't know much about the Proud Boys, but they were the heroes. And they were the ones that were probably there because Trump said, "Stand back, stand by. They're going to be protecting him." So I went up to him. I said, "Are we going inside the Capitol?"
Mm-hmm.
I missed the word legally because see, the
Mm-hmm.
Proud Boys would never break the law. Oh
Right. Yeah.
no,
Sure.
never. I mean, in my mind, they're the heroes. They keep people safe from
Yeah.
Antifa. And they said, "No, ma'am, we're not going inside the Capitol." But I followed them, and one of their ladies that was there that was recording things said that some of them were planning on going inside. I have that on video.
So they knew that. Yeah, and that's what's interesting because again, one of the things I want to get to is there's a lot of people that I think, and they should still be held accountable, but they got kind of drawn into the Capitol by, again, that mob mentality. Everybody's going, all of a sudden you're so emotionally into it and you just kind of follow people in. And when you see other people doing it, it's like, okay, here we are, right? It's different though, but there were certainly kind of ringleaders in this, people that had planned all along to go into the Capitol. I mean, I'll tell you, on January 1st, I'm on a call with all the Republican congressmen, and I'm talking to Kevin McCarthy. So he's leading it, and he had just said he was going to vote against certification of the election. And I said, "Kevin, there's going to be violence on January 6th. And he's like, "Well," he didn't say anything. And I just said, "Look, we have convinced a third of the country that an election was stolen. And if you believe an election is stolen, like if I believed the election was stolen, I would have been right out there with you on the Capitol because this is America. We don't steal elections." And his response to me was just like, "Okay, Adam, next caller or next person to talk." And so he dismissed that. And I had seen on Twitter, this idea of the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers kind of leading the charge into the Capitol, but I think people just didn't take it seriously because to that point, I mean, except for the British in 1812, the Capitol had never been sacked like that. So it seemed completely unrealistic. By the way, another quick story. So when I was running for Congress back in 2010, I guess, somebody had come up to me and they go, "Hey, you're a military member. You've taken an oath to the Constitution. Let me tell you about this group called the Oath Keepers that you should join." And thankfully, they put it in terms of, we're just patriots who want to defend our country. Thankfully, I said no, I'm not an oath keeper. But it was, a few years ago when I'm like, you know what? That's right. I tried to get, they tried to recruit me for that. So that's kind of interesting. I'm not an oath keeper, though, thankfully. Um, so you end up, so the day kind of goes down and you go home. It's over. What's going through your mind when you're home? I believe that the law enforcement actually showed up a number of months later, right? Is that when they came to you? So talk about that kind of period after.
Yeah, well, it was probably about 8 months later. And then I can't prove this, but I'm very well known by name. Every officer in Boise, Idaho, they know me.
Mm.
I got a connection with the Capitol Police here in Boise, Idaho, because I had caught somebody uh, with a knife saying FUCK, USA, and I got him on video and I turned him in. So we had a talking relationship. I was out there. If I saw anybody breaking laws or doing anything, I turned the video in. So that night I had called them and I said, I don't know what's happening. I got shoved into the Capitol. I asked an officer to help me leave. And Mike, he was the one that was guarding our governor here, said, don't worry, Pam. I know you wouldn't have done anything to break the law, but you did, and I'll keep an eye out for you. So when it came time for my arrest, I want everybody to know that the FBI did treat me very well. The lady that helped me in the restroom, because I had to change clothes, was almost like a sister to me. I was crying. I said, I've never been to jail in my life. I can't deal with this. This is horrifying. She says, but don't worry, you're going to be out on time for your last appointment. I had my last radiation appointment. So I think they allowed me to finish all my chemotherapy and all my cancer appointments. I think that's why they waited, because they knew me. And I think they knew about that.
So okay, that ends up coming down. At what point do you kind of transition to like, hey, Donald Trump is great, he should win this election, to like regret, I guess? And I should tell people you were very active in campaigning for Kamala Harris. So it's not, when we're talking about this, it's not like you said, I don't like Donald Trump, but I still like, you basically, like me, said, this is a dangerous thing. I still have some conservative viewpoints, but it's like, I know that the Republican Party is dangerous. And so what is it that kind of helped you to come to an understanding of what, I don't know, what happened and made you realize that, hey, I've got a campaign, for instance, for Kamala Harris?
Well, I started the first J6X space to help the J6 defendants, and their families came in and researchers came in, and they were giving me all this information. When I found out that Ryan Samsel, Gateway Pundit, put an article out that in jail he had lost his whole eye. So I thought, that's not okay. Everybody had been calling me at this time. Laura Loomer, you name the names, they were calling me. I was a counselor. People were suicidal. Ryan Samsel's girlfriend had called me. So I got a hold of her and I said, what's going on? How did he lose his eye? She says, Pam, he didn't lose his eye. I said, what? He's lying? So I got a hold of his lawyer. Yeah, I found out he was lying, but his Give, Send, and Go went up $40,000 that day. So I
Just a grift.
I took it back to MAGA Group, my space. They got mad at me. They said, what information? And I was willing to give them the resources to check that I wasn't lying. They didn't like that. They ended up kicking me out. So I started the J6 gaslighting space, and the sedition hunters, real researchers, Democrats came in, and I thought, you guys sounded the same to me. The difference was because, I thought they told us that Democrats want to turn this into a communist country, so You're sounding the same. You brought the receipts. Nobody could say anything without some proof, a link, something to research. I thought, this is amazing. Oh my God. So I got all the goods on January 6th. Everything was alive, from Nancy Pelosi to the doors being open, you name it. I mean, videos and links and proof. And I thought, oh my God, I believed all this stuff. I've got to stand up against this and put the facts out there about what really happened. Not what I want to think happened, the facts about what happened. And that got me started.
So I think that's what's interesting is what I've noticed, 5-10 years, and maybe longer, is there's people that are interested in facts and people that are only interested in a narrative that complies with what they already believe. So when we were on the January 6th committee, one of the things that I particularly spent a lot of interest in, and I was kind of uniquely situated to do it because, again, I ran in the right-wing spaces. I knew where to look. I knew who the influencers were, right? I understood what the conspiracies were. And unfortunately, Democrats have a hard time grasping the depth of the conspiracies that exist just because it's not within their space, right? They're not on the same news sites. They're not looking at the same people on Twitter. And so I was coming back to the committee with like, hey, just so you guys know, there's, millions of people out there that believe that this was orchestrated. This is before, it was publicly accused of being orchestrated. There was this video. I remember a couple specific videos that kind of the conspiracies came out on. There was one where a guy supposedly was flashing his badge and he pulled out like his hand and it looked like, because it was a grainy video, that he had a badge. Well, further research, he actually had a vape in his hand and was going to take a hit of the vape. Yeah. And but they're like, look, he's got a badge, so he's a Fed. And then there was another one where a guy tries to exit from a fire door. and he looks up and then looks back at the door and then opens the door. And they're like, look, the riot, this guy was looking up, he was a Fed, and he was looking up at a security camera to the control room to tell them to open the door, and they opened the door. Well, two things. First off, there is no control room in the Capitol, so there's nobody sitting there looking at all these screens, right? Secondly, what actually happened is he tried to exit this fire door, and this fire door, you have to hold it for 5 seconds and then it opens, and he couldn't open it. So he looked up at the staircase, his buddy was there, and his buddy then told him how to open it, and he opened it. But the point in all of that is, there are the cops were removing the bike racks. Well, they removed the bike racks because they were being used as weapons, and so they were removing them as weapons. And so all of that conspiracy theory that came out, it's very compelling if you listen to it until you get the facts. And then the question is, and you happen to be very smart in this, is, are you going to listen to the facts or not? Do you want to know the truth or not? And you chose to know the truth, and it opens your eyes, which is, you may not agree with everything Democrats, or you maybe not have agreed with everything Republicans did when you were that, but like, facts are facts. They lead you where they lead you. And so since then, obviously, you've been very outspoken. You've been very kind of out there, and it's cost you a lot. And this is what I really want to talk about a little bit, which is what I think a lot of people need to understand is when you leave your tribe, right? And that's what politics becomes to us. It becomes a tribe. The Republican Party was my tribe. For a lot of Democrats, the Democratic Party is their tribe. MAGA, for MAGA, it's a tribe. When you make a decision to leave it, there's a huge cost. Just like in the historical days, if you left your tribe, you may die because your tribe was there to protect you. Yeah. So talk about when you made the decision to leave, before we get into like what people are saying to you and that, just talk about how that felt personally when you started to realize that you were, I guess, leaving a tribe, or that those relationships were being torn. How did that feel?
Well, it started with getting honest with myself. With the help of my therapist, Dr. PhD from Harvard. I had been seeing him for a long time because of my past childhood trauma. And he looked at me and said, Miss Hemphill, you still got a little victimhood going on here. You're not a victim of January 6th. Listen, you were a volunteer. And I thought, I left his office thinking, I'm never going to talk to him again. He was right. Mm-hmm. I was playing a little victim. I wouldn't have pushed officers. I wouldn't have pushed the barrier. It doesn't matter. I was there. And I didn't want to hear that. I didn't want to face that. I know I got shoved in. I wouldn't have personally just walked in. It doesn't matter. See, all those little excuses make me sound like I'm a little innocent, poor 69-year-old granny with cancer, which they were trying to put out there, that the DOJ was weaponized against me. No, they were not. I was guilty. I was there. I could have left. I made a choice to stay, unfortunately. Yeah. No excuses. I know what happens when you're in a group and all that, but you have a moment of clarity, and I think you need to listen to it when it's happening. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if I answered.
So when you started to feel that, now you start to, because you're online, you start to see the attacks come your way from the right particularly. Talk about some of that and, some of the threats, some of the people that team up against you. Like, what is it that happens, and talking about what that feels like? Because I think a lot of people, you and I can understand that, but there's a lot of people that have never experienced that. Until you experience it, you don't necessarily know what it is.
Yeah, I started the J6 gaslighting space, and people started contacting me on DM saying, I can't come to your space anymore. What's the matter? Well, I'm getting attacked. I'm getting doxxed. I said, really? Yeah, if anybody that's platforming you is getting attacked. And I thought, oh, that's horrible. From 1,000 or more people coming in my space, debunking the January 6th is all we were doing, and bringing facts about January 6th, including anything you had said, all the people that were out there giving us this information and trying to share it to get rid of that lying narrative of theirs, got attacked. So my space went down from 10 people from 1,000, It started working. People were listening to him, and they kept putting out stuff about my childhood and my past and lying about me. But one thing they haven't done? They've never debunked what I put out there about January 6th.
That's right. That's
now,
right.
One thing, if they said Pam's lying about January 6th, never. They know I know. what happened on January 6th. Can't lie to me. I was there. I watched you push the barriers. The officers were not starting any problems. You were, and you pushed the barriers, and you pushed me down. See, they stepped on my head, put up my shoulder, cut my knee, broke my glasses. I was not breathing. That's why I stand for all the Capitol Police officers. They saved my life that day. Even a rioter like myself. We owe them our gratitude.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's interesting. You mentioned about the victimhood thing, which is this is something that courses through MAGA in a huge way, which is this idea. And look, I want to be clear. So the roots of where this started sometimes are not exactly wrong. There was a feeling by people, and there still is, that like the coasts, whether it's the West Coast or the East Coast, has the power. They ignore people in the middle of the country. And I think there's some accuracy to that. I think, when we look at economic policy, when we look at how, and this is, by the way, right and left do ignore the middle of the country. And so that animosity grew, but then Donald Trump comes along. And instead of saying, frankly, Pam, what you would say to somebody or what your counselor says to you, which is, hey, you're not a victim here. You can set your own guideline. You can set your own guidelines. You can set your own Instead, Donald Trump comes along and he prevents a victim narrative to people. Here's what I found was interesting. Right after January 6th, there were people that were arrested, and 90% of them were expressing remorse for what they did. And then at some point a few months later, Fox News and some of those groups start putting their arms around the defendants and calling them political prisoners. And you took from a self-owning narrative where people are like, yes, I did it, to a narrative of you're a victim of the government. And that's what took hold. And look, I mean, you could tell me you have a better background in understanding therapy and counseling and psychology better than I do. It's probably pretty bad for people to go through life thinking of themselves as a victim, right? That's got to be quite unhealthy to go through life and just say, I'm a victim, I'm a victim, I'm a victim, I'm not in control.
Yeah, they got to live with that, and they know they're lying to themselves. It's very difficult. They're coming after me, but they're really coming after you.
Yep.
So it scared everybody to death.
That's right.
That was his cover, because he has to lie that the government's been lying about him, right? So he's got to continue his lie. That's why he pardoned everybody. But I can only lie to myself for so long, and they've got to get rid of me, because that's what I'm doing. I'm putting a light on their lies, and they hate it. That's why I'm getting scared. I don't care. I'm going to continue putting a light on your lies, because sedition hunters kind of ran. We got one or two still out there because after the pardons, but we got to keep this up. We cannot stop. We got to keep putting the facts out there, no matter what they say or do. They're just a lot of them talking. I know.
That's right.
But the smear campaign has kind of gotten to me a little bit, because they're lies, and they have gotten to a few people one of the Capitol Police officers, and it bothers me. Please call me. I'll explain the other side of the story. Like a divorce court. There's two sides to every story. And they're not listening. They're not calling and saying, Pam, what's the other side? Because this is what I'm hearing. I appreciate that, because they're doing everything they can to get rid of me, and it's been working. Democrat Party refused to have me come on because they heard from the Democrats and these smear campaign people. I've had podcasters call me and say, I've gotten a lot of phone calls about you not to platform you, or they're dox me. Dream for America canceled me. 5051 doesn't want me really there per se. I mean, I can make a list of the Democrats don't want to platform you. You're too much controversy. What's the controversy?
Right.
I mean, don't put me in a box with January 6th. I didn't hit officers. I didn't push barriers. I'm not minimizing what I did. But however, I'm the only J6er. If you're going to talk to an alcoholic, you need to be an alcoholic like me. So you need a J6er to confront them. Who else can do that?
That's right.
Well,
that's what I want to get into a little bit too, is so when I realized this was happening to you was during the 50-51 rallies, and you were poised to speak at, I think, Boise, Idaho one, right? Is that it? And then you were going to have a speaking slot. And then you get an email from the Democratic Party chairwoman out there that said, look, in essence, it's not my fault, but there are some people that are unwilling to forgive you for January 6th. That's the paraphrase. And I saw that. I got very angry. Galen actually wrote about this. And here's the point. Look, you know who's very good at forgiving people and bringing them back into the fold? Donald Trump. I honestly believe tomorrow, if I got on TV and said, you know, I was wrong and Donald Trump is amazing, I would
Yeah.
be at the Oval Office in 48 hours. That's his superpower. But what he does is he sends the message, I'll forgive you, but you can never stray again. And that's why you see people around him that are complete sycophants. So if we are going to provide a force that can defeat MAGA, what we're going to have to do is get to 50.1 or 51%. And here's what we saw in the last presidential election. We don't have those numbers. We lost, okay? So the only way to get to those numbers is to welcome back people that maybe had been part of MAGA, maybe had been there on January 6th and seen the way. And by the way, I would much rather have somebody like you out there speaking, shedding light on what's going on than even Nancy Pelosi. You know, Nancy Pelosi doesn't understand from the inside of what's going on. The reason these people run a smear campaign against you and me as well is because we're especially offensive to them because we were one of them. And then we saw the truth. And it reminds them every day that they don't see the truth and they can't see the truth. And so for Democrats out there, this is where I want to passionately say, if you are unwilling to welcome people that have seen the light back into the fold or into the fold, don't expect to ever win again. And don't ever talk about being in a uncomfortable alliance, as I said at the Democratic National Convention, to defend democracy, because you don't really think democracy is a threat if the biggest thing to you is just to pout about somebody having been part of January 6th. So you get that email and get disinvited. First up, how did that make you feel, understanding that you had just spent a few years campaigning for Kamala Harris? You had spent time doing what you're doing, probably doing as much or more than most of the people to restore this kind of sanity. How did that feel when you got that email and other disinvites that you've got?
Oh, it was heartbreaking. It's not about Pam. They don't
Mm-hmm.
get this. This is about the message from a J6 that was there, that broke the law, and have been able to debunk their narrative. I called it "Stop the Spin." That's my only objective, and to help those that have family members that are frightened. They don't know what to do. They want to get their family members out of MAGA. And I can be a part of helping that by what I do is spread things and tell people about people like you, Stephen Hansen, who wrote the book, The Cult of Trump. That's what I'm good at. I like to do that because I don't know everything. So I'm trying to help them. But if I had stayed in MAGA, they have thousands of followers on X. They have made millions of dollars. So that's one of the things I keep saying. You're only doing this if you're not doing it for money. Of course, I'm not. Disgrace for a J6er, not other people, but a J6er only, a criminal, to make any money from January 6th. I mean, that would be a slap in the face to the Capitol Police. So I wouldn't dare. I have a plan. If I can get a book written, I want to donate all that money to the Capitol Police, especially the 4 that committed suicide, their families. That's my plan, my hope. And I'll get the receipts that I didn't take it out. But their message is out there. They're platformed everywhere. They got documentaries. They've got books out there. They're making so much money. And here they're trying to shut me down. It's like, why am I doing this? Well, because I love America. And I don't like being lied to. I went to 60 days in prison. To you, that's nothing, 60 days. Oh, no. Sleep in a bed where there's a window open and there's ducks talking all night. Live with that every day for 60 days. And the hell that I've been through, you don't know. My boyfriend of 12 years left me because he's MAGA. I've had a lot of losses, death threats, scared at night. It's been really hard. It's been very difficult to have people push back on me because all I'm trying to do is let you know you've been lied to. That's it. That's it. That's all I'm trying to do. But again, like I told you, they cannot debunk what I'm sharing about January 6th. They've never been able to do that. And they don't dare because we know, you and I, what really happened on January 6th. I got to just keep going. It's not about me. It's not about Pam. You're not platforming Pam. It's not about notoriety. What do I want that for? Do you know what happened? I hate doing this. I'm not a speaker. I'm not a person that should be speaking. I'm an alcohol and drug counselor. I can help you with your addictions. But I'm not a get out there in public and speaker and talk as well as you and all the other people that, the Lincoln Project, they do such a wonderful job. They're speakers, they're educated, they got education, they got experience. But I just want to let you know that you can leave the cult of Trump, because it is a cult, that Trump is a dangerous narcissist. You need to look up and learn about a narcissist. And I've been screaming this from the hilltops. I was on CNN with um, Abby Phillips, and I told her back then, a year and a half ago, I said, anybody that's around Epstein, that's enough for me if he's friends with him. In fact, that's what I wanted to ask you before we do end. Thank you so much he has not asked me to do this, but he did. Oh my God. And thank you
Well,
for what you
thanks.
put in. But you talked about in this book, just briefly, I want to ask you, about Tammy Baker and what's going on now with the Epstein files. You were way ahead of all this before everybody else. It was really interesting.
Okay, everybody, we had a bit of a technical glitch and Pam dropped off, but we got a huge percent of this thing done. And I just want to say to Pam, thank you for spending the time and talking to us about the personal cost to you, about your whole story there. And I hope everybody takes from this conversation that there are people out there, as we feel kind of disheartened or we feel like there's no hope, there are people out there in their own way that are trying to push back. And it's not just Democrats. It's not just, me, people like me. There are folks that were deep in MAGA that are now spending a good deal of time trying to win people back, trying to present a example to folks that life is about more and that you don't need to be lied to. So I want to say thank you to all those folks. And I'm going to try to platform as many of those as I can to bring on here to share with you so you can get an insight into the cost that this has on people, so you can get an insight into what makes them tick, what drew them into it in the first place, and how we can be supportive to continue to grow this movement. Thank you for spending the time watching. I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Take care.